Magalhaen to Stokes, who's onside. 1-0.
Here's Sims. It's a good serve this from Southampton. They could finish the job here. It's Shane Long, and he has done it. Just a minute to play. That's stoppage time. Here's Letizia. Oh, better to say farewell than one of the finest players ever to wear the red and white.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saints FC podcast. I think we're at episode 48 now, maybe even 49. I should probably, know my numbers a little bit better. To the left of me today, those of you who are watching on YouTube, you're going to spot a slightly unusual face. This is Professor Simon Kemp. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
So I don't think we've ever had anyone quite as qualified as you on the podcast.
Not qualified in football.
I did make that joke when I was chatting to Freddie from The Ugly Insider that, maybe you're not that qualified on football, but you are qualified to talk about Southampton because you've been a Saints fan for a very, very, very long time. Indeed. We're going to get into that just in a few moments. Of course, if you want to get in contact with the podcast, you can email us saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter @saintsfc podcast. Let us know what you think of Simon's thoughts, his stories. Let us know what you think about Saints' performances over the last few weeks, and if you ever think we're going to score a goal again, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Simon, just before we actually get into you and the podcast, obviously we had quite a tragic weekend in the Premier League. With Leicester City owner Mr. Now this is going to be a tough one for me, Srivaddhanaprabha.
Excellent.
Dying in that awful helicopter crash. We know as Southampton fans what it's like to lose an owner that you kind of love and adore and has that love for the club. We still kind of think about Marcus Lieber. His name still gets sung at St Mary's.
Rightly so.
And I imagine this is going to be the same thing at Leicester City. I mean, the Saints game tomorrow has been cancelled, of course, which I think is the right thing to do. But what a guy! He gave Leicester City, such belief, and for them to win the Premier League title is an amazing thing for Leicester City, but I also think it's an amazing thing for clubs like Southampton. You can dare to dream. You can believe that the impossible is possible. So I don't know if you had any thoughts about him and the tragic weekend we've just had.
Yeah, it was a huge shock. I remember turning on the news and seeing that as it was coming through, and I had earlier to that actually turned off the Leicester West Ham game on BT Sport, and it turned out that when they were doing towards the end of the analysis, they actually heard the explosion, they actually heard the crash, and they actually interrupted their broadcasts from there. And it was just something difficult to get your head around, and it was, I'm not quite sure the reasons for withholding the details for so long. It might just be because there were so many financial things taken into consideration with his business interests, but it's horrible for the family in particular. But you're right, there's no doubt the game should be cancelled tomorrow. It should be postponed, because you can't expect those players to be able to play in those circumstances, because ultimately football is a game about people, and there's no other way of looking at it.
Absolutely. So our thoughts out to all of those Leicester City fans, Mr. Srivaddhanaprabha and his family. We send our sincere condolences from the Saints FC podcast, and I also think I'd like to thank his family, and thank him posthumously for getting involved in football, because that Leicester City title winning season was it was wonderful. It was Southampton's best season for years and years as well, but it really demonstrated that you can, if all things go your way and you have a really strong group of players, that the top six can be broken and they can be overcome, and that was just wonderful to see that.
That was amazing, because that season, my son and myself, we had our season tickets, we were in the family stand, St Mary's for the whole of that season. That season was just a magic season. Whether you were a Saint supporter or a Leicester supporter, particularly obviously as a Leicester supporter, it was a wonderful season. And I remember being at that match and the way the Leicester came back in that game, because we were 2-0 up in that match. Yeah. And I remember just watching it thinking, we got this wrapped up. Leicester, they nearly got relegated last season. This will be fine. 2-0 up at home. We're playing some scintillating football. Have been all the way through to that point in the season because it was still relatively early. I think it was October time. And Leicester just absolutely came back into it with such ferocity, such amazing team spirit, and the way they played their way through. And I remember them really going through the middle and really making use of that whole Kante Drinkwater axis, and Vardy was on his run of most consecutive goals scored in the Premier League, and they came into it. And at the end of it, we were hanging on. It was 2-2 and we were hanging on. But I remember walking away with my son and just saying, we should have won that. It's only Leicester, we should have won that. And then later on in the season, you come to realise, actually, that wasn't a bad result.
Yeah, that was actually quite good to get 2 goals against Leicester. Yeah.
Considering how many teams they turned over that season. And yeah, I think the majority of fans who don't follow the really big clubs, I think that in terms of the mega clubs, like the ones who are seen in the media as being the ones who seem to think there's a divine right to be in the top 6, then if you're not supporting one of those, then I think you can't help but have a soft spot for Leicester because that was so exciting. And I can't ever remember really wanting a team to win as much as I wanted Leicester to win that season. Really because it was just because it gave us hope.
Yeah, it was such a troped out kind of cliche, but it was a victory for football, wasn't it?
It really was,
especially for English football with the Premier League and the dominance of the big teams.
Yes.
Anyway, so Simon, your voice is kind of careering down people's earphones now, and we're at the University of Southampton where you're a professor. You're a professor of sustainability, but you're clearly not from Southampton. So, can I ask how a Welsh lad ends up supporting Southampton? How did that happen?
Probably the same reason a number of people ended up supporting Southampton, if it was in the early to mid 1990s. And there's just the simple name, Matthew Le Tissier. I grew up loving football, played football all the way through my childhood, teenage years, into early adulthood. I've even been managing a youth football team, so I absolutely love the game. But coming from Llanelli, which is not a team that's got, it's not an area that's really sort of seeped in football. It's all about the rugby. So my formative years were all about going to rugby matches. So, I didn't miss a single match down at Stradey Park following Llanelli Rugby Club, now known as the Scarlets. I went every single season. And as an indicator of how old I am, season ticket then, for a kid, £1.
Oh, my word.
So you had £1 and you had a whole season's worth of sport. It was great. But I never really developed any sort of firm affinity with a football club as a result of that. So I was always very much about that, following the rugby, but playing football. And so I used to watch football religiously, but didn't really have a team. But then when I started seeing more and more of Matt Lettice, just the things that he was doing, the things that he could do were just magic. And I started travelling around that period. I was living in Cardiff. So I started travelling from Cardiff to matches at the Dell. Really difficult to get tickets because you couldn't buy them online in those days and things. I had to try to phone up or sometimes even make a determined trip to go to the box office and get tickets and things like that. So I used to travel down to Cardiff specifically to see Matthew Le Tissier, and it sort of grew from there. So I then ended up, coincidentally of course, coming to study an MSc at the University of Southampton, and that was only meant to be for 1 year.
Was it really coincidentally, Simon? Because I'm here in Southampton University for in the Shackleton building, which is the home for the School of Geography and Environmental Science, which is where you're based, and this is where I did my degree.
It is, yeah.
And I have to be honest, I chose Southampton because of the football team.
Let's just say it was a helpful factor in making the final decision.
Was there a nice moment of serendipity?
Oh, there absolutely was, yes. And yeah, I must admit, I do remember Yeah, there was some elements of coursework where I really should have been working, but I went to the Dell instead. So I went to quite a lot of matches that season. Obviously, as a student, I couldn't afford a season ticket, and you couldn't get season tickets to the Dell. They're impossible. They're gold dust anyway. So I used to go as much as I could, and yeah, I just started going more and more. So it got to the point where I was going to at least every other game. I've even got my old seat from the Dell in my bedroom. Yeah. In
your bedroom? I'm looking around your office and I can spot it here.
It's a number 7 seat, obviously. And it's from the old original stand. So it's one of the older wooden seats. Because I was there at the last game, the game against Brighton. And it was just, you'll never see that many people get into a ground with screwdrivers.
Yeah.
I was just on that day because everybody's just dismantling the seats.
So was the Brighton game the one, because we had the Arsenal game was the last competitive fixture, wasn't it?
One, yeah.
And then...
The Brighton one was just that whole closing the cycle of the Brighton game was the first ever game with the Dell. And then Uwe Rosler scored that goal, I think in the first 10 minutes or so. And that was the last ever goal scored with the Dell, although officially the last ever goal scored with the Dell is that goal by Matty, which is just magic.
I think probably when we saw the fixture list and we thought, Arsenal at home on the last day of the Dell, we're going to have another battle. Fixture that we've got a chance to win. But, you know, that what a way for it to finish competitively at the Dell with that volley.
It's beautiful, wasn't
just
it?
Brilliant, you know, and that probably, if they'd known that was going to happen, I doubt they would have done the last
no,
game.
Probably not, no.
Okay. So, I mean, you've been supporting Saints for years, and last time we met at Sustainability Conference for Higher Education, we'd had a beer after, you know, a tough day of kind of lectures and very hard work, you know, and we're giving our brains a little bit of a rest. And you told me a really fantastically funny story about how you ended up on the pitch at St Mary's.
Yeah.
Can you start from the beginning? Because I loved every minute of this story.
Okay. Yeah, this wasn't my finest moment, but I can laugh about it now. It's fine now. Basically, it was in 2003, and it was the start. It was towards the start of the season after the FA Cup final, and there was just a competition happening down in St Mary's, and at that time we didn't have any kids, so we had free reign to go out and do whatever we wanted to, and they advertised this whole idea of a Saints pub quiz, but to be held at the stadium and to be hosted by Matt Le Tissier. So there was no other thing needed other than the idea of going to St Mary's, being able to drink beer with Matt Le Tissier and other Saints fans, and just have a bit of a pub quiz and a bit of fun. So myself and 3 of my friends, we went along, one of whom is now my wife, and we went along to this event, and somehow or other all the cards fell into place and we managed to come, I can't remember whether it was second or third in that pub quiz, and we were delighted with this. Obviously, you know, we'd had a great night. Matt Le Tissier was telling a range of different stories in between things as well, which was very, very amusing. You know how entertaining he is. So that was great. And it turned out then that the prize for that was to be able to go to St Mary's to win a smart car. And that wasn't a motivation for going whatsoever, but it was quite a nice output. So the top 4 teams got to go to St Mary's to compete for this smart car. So we thought, wow, brilliant. And we managed to get some free tickets as part of the results as well. So we got to go to the game. And the game was Southampton versus Arsenal. So the first time we'd played them, I think, since that FA Cup final. And it was on Monday, the 29th of December 2003. And it was a live Sky Sports game. So it was the Monday night football match. And I thought, great. All they told us was that you're going to go on the pitch at half time to compete for this smart car. So because I've got this sort of tendency to overthink things slightly, and also with my work might be slightly related to that, I don't know. But we then decided that this is going to be a quiz, because the first point had been a quiz, so it had to be a quiz again. So I went through all the record books. I went through everything. I was trying to memorise as much information as possible. Key dates in Southampton Football Club history, all data around Ted Bates, all stuff around Terry Payne, Laurie McMenemy, Mick Shannon, Matthew Le Tissier, any of the current players who were in the squad at that point in time, because this is the point when we had Michael Svensson and we had Beattie and Phillips, and I think we just signed no, Dilap had come a season earlier, I think. So we had all the key players. So I learned all the information about them. I knew all the key stats around Letice and Shannon and all that lot. And also then took it a step further. Then decided, right, so this is going to be about a smart car. So then calculated how many footballs you can get into a smart car. Just in case we asked that question. Can you remember
how many it is?
I can't remember, no. It was 15 years ago. I was trying to recall this over the weekend in preparation for this. I can't remember, and I was doing work all weekend, so I didn't have a chance to recalculate it. So calculated how many footballs. Obviously, that would be the size 5, and you get the right dimensions. How many would fit into a smart car. Also then calculated how many smart cars would fit on the pitch of St Mary's, whether it would actually be in the ground itself in terms of filling the whole stadium, but also within the pitch dimensions. How many smart cars you would need in order to form a chain all the way from St Mary's to Highbury. And also the amount of smart cars you need to fill all the way from St Mary's to Highbury and back. The number of smart cars that you would need to fill the Millennium Stadium, because there's linking it to the FA Cup final that we'd just been playing in earlier that year. So I had an absolute mountain of information.
You had all bases covered there, didn't you?
Tried to cover everything, because you know, it's like you either go all in or you go home. So we wanted to win this by the time we got it. And particularly since this smart car was a red and white striped smart car.
Oh.
Exactly. And the idea being able to drive that around the city. And from a sustainability perspective, small engine size, low capacity, low emissions, great.
Yeah.
Kind of argue anymore.
You can get away with that being a sustainability professional, yeah.
Just about, yeah. So we were determined we really wanted to win this. I think there were other things to try to remember as well and revise, but I can't remember exactly what they were now. But I prepared for weeks for this, really did, because somehow or other I got elected as our team representative to go on the pitch to answer these things. So come the day of the game, and we had to get there early, so we got there very much aware of the fact that this was going to be the Sky Sports game, and I think it was just about 10-20 minutes before, the players always come out for the warm-ups. This was 20 minutes before the players come out for warm-ups. So about an hour before kick-off, stadium was beginning to fill a bit, and we had to go down to the pitch for the semi-final. So I was there, had all my notes, had everything in my head. I'd been prepped by my friends all the way down there, asking me questions. I'd come back with the answers, bang, 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 all the way through. Got on the pitch, and they said, right, okay, so semi-final. We now want you to race in a child's toy car the length of the pitch, and the winners, and we'll have 2 heats, and the winners of the 2 heats go through to the final, which will take place at half time. And I was like, are you not going to ask any questions? No questions. But this was the result of a pub quiz, so surely we're going to do the same thing. No questions. It's great. So they pulled up this little toy car, and it was genuinely one of these things that you might see in Toys R Us. Like a noddy type. Pretty much like a noddy type car, yeah, which you could just about fit an adult into sitting down, but not very easily. It wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't much smaller than a smart car, to be fair. But so there were no pedals as such. There were sort of pedals, but it didn't quite work things. So it was just one of these things where you had to just sit in there.
Like Fred Flintstone type.
Very much Fred Flintstone. That's a good one. I like that. Yeah. So we had to go down the side of the pitch on this, what was not quite a track, obviously, but that bit, which has now got this really weird red carpet on going around the pitch, which I'm a bit confused by that. So had a race and went through, did the heat, and absolutely nailed it. I was so far ahead of the other person in their car, and I was chuffed to bits. This person, I don't think they even reached halfway by the time, even the halfway line, by the time I'd actually got down to the end of the pitch.
So you're through to the final at this point.
Through to the final, absolutely chuffed, thinking, right, we're ready for this.
And you've realised that despite all your efforts on the research, that's not going to come in handy, but you're a dab hand.
I was still hoping they might actually do that.
Yeah. But you're a dab hand at Fred Flintstone car racing at this point. You're feeling confident.
I was, yeah. So, I was more focusing on that. Yeah. The fact that Perez scored the winning, what turned out to be the winning goal in the first half, did dampen my spirits somewhat, but I was still, still ready for this thing. So come half time, and had to go down pitch side, and they always do that half-time entertainment, where we were the half-time entertainment. And I was obviously a bit conscious that it was the Sky Sports Monday night game, and whether they might actually cut to the pitch at any point just to fill some time. So I was, bit conscious about that. And I also had a lovely bobble hat on. It was a work of beauty. It was actually knitted especially for this occasion by the grandmother of one of our team, Natalie. She actually made us 4 retro old school football hats. So it was a knitted number with a bobble on the top, red and white stripes. To be honest, it did look a little bit Where's Wally. But so we all 4 of us had our hats on, and I had my hat on. I thought, no, her grandmother's made this. She's going to be watching the match, so I should wear this. So come the race, there's me against the finalist, and they just go. So went flying down, except I could barely move. It turned out that whilst the other person was just streaking away, they'd had the car that I'd had in the first leg in the semi-final. I'd had the car that the person I was racing against in the semi-final had. And one car moved very fluidly with the wheels, very, very fast. The other car really didn't, not at all. So I was then struggling, but because I'm quite a stubborn individual, even though the other person had streaked to the end and they'd won, I still carried on. And it's this moment that has made me realise that you should never, ever, ever shout anything at a player on the pitch which is less than constructive, because you can hear everything. I've experienced this. It's not nice. The abuse I got off people was really quite dreadful. Some of them were quite fruity in language. Some of them were just laughing, people shouting things, and some of them were about my hat. Some of them were about the fact that I couldn't make this car move and I was an idiot and I was a loser and various other colourful terms. But I was trying, and I got abuse off the crowd all the way down to the end,
And where did you finish? Was it in front of the Arsenal fans, or was it finishing at the chapel end?
Fortunately, finished on the chapel end.
Okay.
It went from Northern down to chapel, so that was okay. That wasn't so bad. But yeah, I was getting some frightful abuse off our fans, the Arsenal fans as well, those who hadn't gone for the half-time pint and pie. And yeah, it was a quite embarrassing thing. So when I eventually got there, the guy who was doing the half entertainment had already congratulated the winner and the smart car, and then sort of turned to me and goes, "So how do you feel?" I was going, "Well, a bit embarrassed, to be honest, you know." Didn't really go to plan, but and I was still getting people chanting at me and things. So yeah, I sort of tried to put my head down a bit and quietly sort of slink back up to the seat. Pitch, but fortunately, it turns out that a hat is a great disguise, because as soon as I was getting people shouting at me all the way as I was walking back, and funny comments and things, and you've got to take them, you've got to take them with due spirit, and I was just laughing back at people and things. But the moment I took the hat off, when I got back down, nobody recognised me. Nobody knew. Yeah, it was quite a relief. Because when I got back up to the seat in the stand, the other 3 were just sort of sitting there looking at the floor, pretending they didn't know me. Their hats were off as well, because the hat was clearly a point of association. But it got worse, because I went to work the next day, and I did actually have some people come to me and going, "Oh, I saw you there. What were you doing? What was that about? You were rubbish, absolutely rubbish. I thought you run and things, and it was hopeless." And yeah, the car wouldn't work. One of them was fixed, the other one would go flying. This one just wouldn't work whatsoever. And they were going, "Oh, no." And I was going, "So you were at the game as well?" And going, "Oh, no, I saw it on telly."
Oh, no.
And I was just, no, oh my God, this is
how many million
Sports.
viewers do they get on Sky Sports?
I don't want to think about it. I really don't want to think about it at all. I mean, at that point as well, it was actually the highest league attendance in the history of Southampton Football Club. At St Mary's, it was 32,175 or something like that. It's only now been bettered by the promotion from Championship to the Premier League, the 4-0 win against Coventry. That is the only fixture that actually had a higher attendance, not because they were able to have different ticket allocation because of the Championship. But yeah, it was actually the most populated game in the history of Southampton and live on Sky Sports. And I was wearing a Where's Wally hat, going down the side of the track in a children's toy that didn't move properly, with a good few thousand people chanting at me. So yeah, never be nasty to people on the pitch. They hear it, and it hurts.
And
still hurts.
Simon, do you have a message to our listeners, who some of them were probably in that group of fans that maybe sent some colourful language your way?
If you did, then I understand. I understand. I looked rather foolish, but I couldn't say at the time that this car just isn't working. I should have just got up, kicked it, and walked off.
Yeah.
That would have been more entertaining. I should have done that, but no, I had to see it through to the end.
The kind of bloody mindedness of right, I've got to finish this.
Yeah, completely.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Simon.
One of my most embarrassing moments, and probably my most embarrassing.
How long did it
moment.
take you to go back to St Mary's after that?
A couple of months, actually.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a season ticket. I had to face up the idea of going back to it, but I was confident that
without the bobble hat, you'd be okay.
The bobble hat, would be fine.
Has the bobble hat ever resurfaced?
Yes. I've actually got a photo of my son wearing that bobble hat at his first ever Saints game.
Okay.
He went to, it was Saints West Brom, I think it was about 4 seasons ago. It was 1-0, Lallana scored, and my son was wearing that bobble hat. I think it was because it was January and it was winter, but he seemed to like it because it was a Saints hat.
Okay, brilliant. So I think there's a clear message here, isn't there, for the Saints fans? You know,
don't do the halftime entertainment.
Like, don't do the halftime entertainment for
don't.
one, but also try and be a little bit nicer to the players because you know they're all human beings. It does affect them, which can be quite difficult. I mean, Charlie Austin put a tweet about come on, get behind us at St Mary's, and you do pick up on things. It's like spider senses. You pick up these things because you've got heightened awareness. It's not natural having that many people watching it. It's not a natural thing at all. I mean, I make a joke with my students frequently that when I'm lecturing, if they're whispering and chuntering away a little bit at the back, I can hear them. Yeah, I can hear them. The reason I can hear them pick up on everything because it's not a natural thing. This might only be about 100 odd people, but you pick up on the little things because you're in a situation where your senses are very much heightened. You're very much aware of your surroundings. You're very conscious of the fact that everybody's looking at you. So you pick up on the littlest things. So I really feel for the players. Yeah, so there we go. Message to the Saints fans. Next game at St Mary's, do your best. Try and get behind the team. I know it's difficult. I mean, Charlie Austin saying that as well. But, we want to see the action on the pitch as well. At least you put in an effort. You had put a shift in. Yeah, exactly. I absolutely put a shift in. My legs were burning by the time I got back up those steps. Yeah, hopefully the Saints players can actually put a bit of a shift in. And should we get on to Saints currently at the moment? I think maybe at the end we'll come back to maybe your favourite Saints memory as well. So we'll come to that at the end so that we can actually get a nice little story out of you as well, and something a little bit more cheery than getting dogs abuse from the St Mary's faithful. But we do have to cover off the recent fixtures as well. And the last 2 games we've had since we last recorded was the 0-0 against Bournemouth and the 0-0 against Newcastle. And both games were relatively similar, I think. And same score. The reason why I think they're similar, same score, 0-0. Again, 2 kind of improved performances from Saints. I think the away point at Bournemouth was valuable. Actually. But, most Saints fans, and Mark Hughes said it himself, we had to follow up that performance with a victory against Newcastle, which we didn't. Once again, creating lots and lots of chances. I think we had about 24 shots on goal against Newcastle, only 4 of them on target, and once again, 0 goals. Now, Duncan Alexander, who works for Opta, he's been on the podcast before, and he's been doing some research as well about Southampton. Interesting. And before the game against Newcastle, so bearing in mind this statistic has got worse, for Southampton to reach 50 goals in a season, which is a fairly normal, reasonable, feasible amount of goals you might want to score in a season, out of 38 games, it would take them 1,034 shots to achieve that at their current rate. And I think the most shots in a season is a good couple of hundred less than that. So we're in trouble. We are profligate in front of goal. Yes. But what do we do? What do we do about that? Did you see any hope that we might be getting our goal? I think that's 5 games on the trot now in the Premier League we haven't scored. Well, I mean, I think the most frustrating thing for me with the Newcastle game was that chance right at the very, very start where El Nayusi was put through. It was a nice move, to be fair, and he took the tight angle shot. And in reality, I'm not sure from the offside rule whether Charlie Austin would have been offside in terms of when that passage of play started, because when that passage of play started, he was marginally offside. Yeah. It went through 2 other people before it got to El Nayusi, and then he shot across. He shot straight to the keeper, whereas Charlie Austin was completely open in the middle. Yeah. Now, Charlie Austin was actually behind him, so technically, according to the law, if you pass him backwards, then that's onside.
it would have depended whether the referee had gone back, whether the linesman actually had gone back 2 or 3 phases to that point, which they probably wouldn't have.
No.
So that was really frustrating, because you could see Charleston screaming at him afterwards, just having a right tantrum, just going, "What are you doing?" And he was totally open. That was frustrating. I think we're all still waiting for LNUC to deliver.
Yeah.
There are some stats I've seen somewhere there. He's one of the players with the highest level of assists, which might lead to that whole expected goals thing.
Yeah. It's a good quality assist.
So he's good quality at setting things up, and he did do a couple of good assists. He can't not technically assists because the goal didn't go in the Newcastle game. But I do sometimes worry that he seems to make the wrong decisions in terms of in that final area, and I think that's what's coming down to. Because Redmond's another classic example of this. He's had a storming start of the season. He's looked incredibly dangerous and threatening, but he always seems to take it one player too far, or maybe playing the wrong pass. And I don't know how that can be improved upon, other than just somebody getting the rub of the green and getting their confidence back. It's not something that I think can necessarily be worked on in training. I think it is just a matter of it's going to come good, which is a difficult thing to really try to quantify, because I think we all remember last season we all expected everything to come good, and it just
never did it?
So that is a worry. I'm still not entirely certain around Lamina whether we need to be trying to push him forward a bit more, because sometimes when he does take a shot, it can be a relatively high quality one. I did think we missed Højbjerg on Saturday. Personally, he is my favourite player in that team in terms of overall quality and contribution, everything around his play, everything, the way he speaks afterwards around with the club, and the way he seems to conduct himself. I just think he's just a brilliant ambassador for the club. Great player.
He seems like a proper leader, doesn't he?
He really does.
Ryan Bertrand is the on-pitch captain. I can understand why Hughes wouldn't want to take away the captaincy, because that's a bad thing to do to Bertrand. But Højbjerg seems like a potential on-pitch captain in the making, I would think. It was funny with Højbjerg being ill. I would have almost thought Stuart Armstrong would have been a better option
at home.
Yeah, especially at home. Lamina and Romeo together in the centre of midfield, we've seen time and time again, is a bit too defensive. We don't get enough going forward when those two are paired up, and out of those two, you'd expect Lamina to be the person getting forward, which he did on occasion. He hit the post, but other occasions he was still sat in front of the back four, and you're kind of thinking, well, that's a little bit silly, isn't it? Bit of a waste of time.
And Newcastle weren't offering much. They really weren't offering much at all. They were very, very defensive.
Yeah, they didn't manage a single shot on target for the entire game.
Again, towards the end of the game, I was expecting the usual, whereby we've been pushing, they break away and score a last-minute goal. But even when they did attack, it never really looked threatening.
No.
I didn't get that usual heart-in-the-mouth sensation that I get from so many matches.
Yeah.
So I personally felt that we could have pushed further forward with one of those midfielders, and in that role, you could have gone for more of a diamond, rather than the really defensive middle two with the two wingers. Go for more of a diamond and have either Stuart Armstrong or possibly even Prowsey, because I tell you what, when he came on, the quality of the deliveries and the threat from the set pieces and just something inside the pass, and I personally thought it looked much more dangerous.
Yeah,
particularly
he had a great ball in the closing moments of the game, didn't he? In which Jack Stevens just couldn't quite get on the end of.
Brilliant, and we were missing that. We're missing that quality of creativity. We haven't really got anybody who can do those tiny little sparks of differenceness that are not so pace-based. I mean, Redmond and LUC seem to be very much pace-based with the threat that they've got there. I know everybody's still going on about, and I'm the same with the loss of Tadic, in that he was never about that pace, but it was about those little subtleties of movement, those little bits of just slightly changing the direction of play, just taking plays off balance by the body shape and the body position. We're missing that, because that takes real composure, and with that sort of shape in the body, that only really matters when you're doing it in the slower moments, and we're horribly missing that.
Yeah, I think this kind of malaise that we've had over the last couple of seasons is that lack of quality. And, you know, once again, with Tadic going out the door and Elyounoussi coming in, it looks like we've got someone who's just slightly less good than Tadic in the same position. And I watched the highlights of the Liverpool-Cardiff game, and you see Van Dijk has really improved their defence so much. Mane and Adam Lallana as well. You know, Adam Lallana, who he's had a few.
My second favourite Saints player. I loved him. He was just the best.
He's had quite a few injuries at Liverpool, but even still, he's really struggling to get into that Liverpool first team regularly. And you look at the quality he has, and we just don't have a player of that level of quality anymore.
No, we don't.
And that's the really frustrating thing. And I don't know how closely you follow the Saints' Twitter, but Jake Hesketh scored a wonderful goal against Portsmouth. You know, proper Saints player there, getting a great goal at Fratton Park. And that's I think it's Burton Albion that he's playing for. Yeah. But it was very Lallana-esque, wasn't he? Around about 3 or 4 players held onto the ball, just glued to his feet, and then rockets it into the goal.
He always looked real quality whenever he came on, because I remember he nearly scored on his debut. You know, he saw him score in quite a few of the reserves matches. But he's always looked a really, really talented player. I just wonder whether the management think he's just a little bit too lightweight physically for the Premier League. But hopefully the time he spent in Burton Albion down in League One will do him some good.
Will toughen him up a bit.
Because it's like, if you look at James Maddison with Leicester at the moment, the reason he's come on so strong is because he had that time away. Yeah. Playing in places like Aberdeen and really having to put himself about and then building his way through, and now he's developed himself physically and he's got that confidence, that ability. So Hesketh, Sims, these are the ones that really want.
And Harrison Reed was another player that actually scored a great goal in the week as well. This time for Blackburn Rovers.
I remember there was that game against Everton about 2 or 3 seasons ago, and he was a surprise start, and he was man of the match. He was fantastic.
Yeah, it does seem silly, and you know, if we look back at the Newcastle game, we had Gabbiadini taking crazy wild shots from nowhere. We had Lamina taking long range shots, hitting the post. We had Danny Ings, you know, not playing the right ball to Nathan Redmond. We've got Nathan Redmond, who I think is now the Premier League player who's had the most shots without scoring a goal this season so far.
I didn't know that.
And you know, Charlie Austin, who looks like he can't get 60 minutes out of him, looks totally unfit. And Shane Long, poor Shane Long, works so hard but never seems to be able to score a goal, again missing at the end. And yet you're looking around the leagues, and we've got Jake Hesketh, who looks like he has that level of quality that we haven't seen since Lallana left, or you know. And
what about Sam Gallagher? Are we going to start playing him? Because whenever you see him play, he really looks like he can make a difference. He made he had a great game. Was it against Brighton? Yeah. When he came on there, you know, he should be at least on the bench as an option.
Yeah, I mean, it seems strange because, you know, looking at where we were with Pellegrino last season, I do think Hughes has upped the performances a little bit. The results are no improvement whatsoever. I think if you look at the fixtures that we've had so far this season, and you take the same fixtures against, you know, last season, again, you know, our only victory at this stage is an away win at Palace, which was the same again last season. So there's not an improvement in the results, even if there is a bit of an improvement in perhaps the proactivity in the play. But you know, it seems to be that kind of lack of quality, or that lack of decision making, or that lack of, I suppose, confidence when we get to the final third. And I wonder if, you know, are we trying to protect the young players too much by not throwing them in on this big stage in quite a toxic atmosphere sometimes at St Mary's, and not wanting to expose them to that? But actually, maybe that's the kind of thing that we need to see, you know, happen to give the Saints fans a lift, to see a product from the youth academy go in, someone who's fearless,
we do love
young.
We love having our youth players come through. It does, you're right, it gives the place a massive lift, and we need that at the moment. People are going there with a sense of dread, saying, oh, is it going to be the same again? And once that's why I think that Austin chance in the start of the Newcastle game was so important. That would have given us a massive lift. But yeah, you're right, I think we need to be bringing the youth players through. Whether we're trying to protect them, they need game time if they're going to develop. But also, let's face it, without being too overly harsh on the current players, they're not actually producing the goods. No. And if you're not producing the goods, should you really be guaranteed those starting positions? Should you be guaranteed those positions on the bench? We need to shake it up a little bit. I'd be all in favour of bringing through some. You can't chuck too many in.
No.
And the Premier League is of such a high standard. They've got to have sufficient game time. But why have we sent Gallagher out on loan for the last 2 seasons?
Yeah.
And doing really well. If it's not to developing and then bring him through. I mean, the academy, in terms of injection into the first team, has almost dried up.
Yeah.
Since Pochettino left and Koeman came in, because Koeman was very reluctant to be playing them. To be fair to Puel, he did start bringing youngsters back through again. We all remember the impact that Josh Sims had when he came on for the semi-final away against Liverpool.
Yeah.
Because, Shane Long got the goal, but Sims clearly did everything for that goal. So he started bringing them through. Pellegrino, well, he just didn't quite know what he was doing.
No.
I think is generally accepted.
And interesting to see that his Leganes side are in the relegation zone.
Yeah, exactly.
In La Liga.
He was out of his depth, unfortunately.
Yeah.
He seemed a nice guy, but he was out of his depth. But in recent times, who have we really brought through? I still think James Ward-Prowse can offer more. I still think that he's an incredibly valuable member of the squad. Jack Stevens is now back in, but he was cast aside for most of the start of the season. Even when we went for that back three against Chelsea, Stevens wasn't even part of that. He's come through from the system, but even then he was actually Plymouth before he came to us anyway. So we haven't really been bringing these youngsters through for quite a while now.
I think it is time because we're looking at the players. We know that Danny Ings can score. We know that Charlie Austin can score. We know that Nathan Redmond can score. We know that Gabbiadini can score. Even Shane Long got more than 10 goals in one season for us.
Well, it was that season it was that Leicester winning the title season because I remember Shane Long hadn't really done much at all for us the season before or that season. And I remember going to the Arsenal game. Second half of the season, that Arsenal game on, was it Boxing Day?
Yeah.
I remember going to that and myself and Evan just looked at the team sheet and went, oh, this looks like, not quite sure about this team. And we went on and absolutely battered them. And Martina scored that amazing goal. But Shane Long dominated that game. Yeah. And he went on to dominate the rest of that season. Even though Mane got that hat-trick against Man City towards the end of the season, the player of the match for me that game was Shane Long. He was amazing. Yeah. But and you can forgive it when you've got a striker who will make that level of contribution and get the occasional goal. It's more difficult when we're going through a massive goal drought and we've then got a striker who is doing all that really hard work, but it's not leading to goals by others, and he's not chipping in the goals as well. That's the real sort of difference with him. And he's a lovely guy, and he works so hard, and we all love seeing that. But that chance he had against Newcastle, to be fair, the defender, I can't remember which one it was, managed to just about get the level of block in to block the direction of goal. So even though it looked like Shane Long shot wide, if he had actually shot it on target, it would have hit the defender. So it was one of those unfortunate misses which looked worse than it was, in my opinion.
So I don't know if your teaching kind of background can help Saints here, because we've come to the University of Southampton. I've seen your Times Higher Education Award of being the top teacher of the year. I think, was it 2012 or 2013? Yeah. Which is an amazing award to receive. If you were kind of brought into Southampton as a consultant, teach Southampton how to score goals, what methods would you be applying? What do you think could even possibly help them?
Oh my God. I really don't know. I would never be so bold as to claim to be an expert on that. What I will say is that until recently, and this is obviously of similar levels of quality to the Premier League, I was managing my son's under 8s through to under 11s football team in the East Lean District Mini Soccer League and the Southampton Tyro. And we struggled the first season. The next 3 seasons after that, we barely lost any games. We won a very large percentage of games. I think it was over 80%. Yeah. We were just winning and winning and winning.
Win ratio. That's a bit better than Mark Hughes' 23% or whatever it is at the moment.
Yeah. And the reality is those. And this is where I think there are similarities. Those results were actually glossed over what was really happening, in that we were playing some good football, but we were very much reliant on an amazing goal scoring machine, and we had 2 very, very good strikers who scored a lot of goals, but one in particular just scored goals for fun. It's just incredible, and he was all about the confidence and putting the team around creating the chances for him. We used to deliberately sit a little bit deep to pull the defence in, to create more of an offside line and sit it deep in there, and we used to give instructions to our midfielders to look for the gaps and to hit it hard through the middle for the striker, who was ridiculously fast to run onto and get through. Now, obviously, that tactic is very simplistic.
Yeah.
It's not going to work at Premier League level, but it was about looking at what are the ultimate strength of the team, and the ultimate strength of the team was playing fast balls to that striker, and that then gave him the confidence. And it just comes back to, it is a massive cliche, but it is such a confidence game. And I think at the moment there's got to be some way of building up the confidence of the strikers, but I don't think there's an easy solution to it.
No.
I think the confidence doesn't come from training. We know that. You
have to do it in front of the crowd, don't you?
It's got to be in the match situations, and I just think we all hope that the Brighton away game in the Cup was going to be the real turning point for the season, or the Palace game in particular as well. But there's just got to be that confidence thing. I mean, Danny Ings looks like he can go on a run, and he did go on a bit of a run with goals, but I don't know, I just worry that LNUC might take a bit too long to turn it around. I worry that Redmond still doesn't quite make those killer decisions with the ball to play for the strikers. And I do agree with you. I wonder whether there is an argument for playing Stuart Armstrong. The rumours seem to be that maybe he's finding it a bit more difficult to adapt to the Premier League standards than other players. But he looked great in pre-season in terms of, and it comes back to that whole Tadic argument about having those little bits of creativity. I generally think that's what we're missing, is that spark player. And my understanding is that Armstrong was really brought in for that level of replacement. So in terms of teaching techniques, I don't know. I think it's just all about repetition, practice, confidence.
Drilling and quality and confidence.
It's all about that.
I wonder as well, I mean, you were talking about even your under-8s team sound like they have an identity for the way they played. There was an identity. And I'm struggling to understand what the Mark Hughes Southampton identity is. We're trying lots of different things. We don't, and perhaps that's because he's struggling to see what the best tune he can get out of his players is. Yeah,
I mean, it comes back to something you mentioned in the podcast that you did at the pub for the Chelsea game, where you mentioned there about the changes that were suddenly being made, where we did start the Burnley and pre-season with a back three or back five, whichever way you want to look at it, and then jettisoned that halfway through the Burnley game, and then it didn't resurface until the Chelsea game, and then we went back to the 4-4-2. There does seem to be a little bit of level of confusion there. I think with some matches last season we did look a little bit better with a back three and two wing backs. There's no doubt in the quality of Bertrand and Cedric, particularly Bertrand in terms of creativity. Cedric still doesn't quite, he does seem to overhit crosses. I worry about playing that sort of system in the fact that you then become too reliant on crosses from out wide. I remember seeing one statistic, I probably got the figures wrong, but I remember seeing one statistic a year or two ago. There was a big study about Premier League football showing that a goal gets scored from a cross. It takes 1 in 78 crosses for a goal to be scored from out wide. And if you're playing that wing-back system, you're automatically going so wide, and you've then got a longer time for the ball to come in by the time it gets there. So there's more time for centre-backs to adjust their body position. So I think cutting into the channels a bit more is critical, and I worry whether we've got the creative midfielders to be able to support the wing-backs.
Having that level of quality, isn't it?
It comes back to that, I think.
Okay, so I think we're coming up to the end of the podcast now. We did have another little bit of bad news on Saturday when Glenn Hoddle was whisked out of the BT Sports studios after having a heart attack. Obviously, he was an interesting character for Southampton.
Yes,
not
very much so.
Not well loved.
Nope.
But we did play some wonderful football under Hoddle as well. So I think we should send him our best wishes.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, before we finish this podcast, Simon, I'd love to hear about what your kind of favourite Southampton memory is before we sign off the podcast. Let's finish with something quite glorious.
Okay, so 2, really. First one is a very quick one. there was a Middlesbrough game. I think it was either 3-0 or 4-0. It was either 96 or 97, and I was down by the corner, and the all-time god, Le God, just picked the ball up to go to the corner. Everybody in the stand was doing the usual sort of bowing down, we're not worthy wave, and he turned to the crowd and he just said, far corner, took the corner, bang, far corner. And he scored, and it was just, oh my God, I'll never forget that. That was proper magic. But undoubtedly, my favourite memory was I was lucky enough to get tickets for the 6-3 game against Man United at the Dell, and everything about that game was just magical. I was down the end where Lettis scored that lob, which is still my favourite goal that I've ever seen live in any football match.
I think it's maybe the most beautiful goal ever scored in the Premier League.
It's just gorgeous. And there was the great Berkovic volley and Ostenstad with just the rounding the keeper and just slotting in. Just everything about it was brilliant. Seeing Roy Keane get sent off was always funny.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing from my memory of that game is just the build-up of joy and us chanting, we won 5, and they scored 5, we won 6, and we scored 6, we won 7. Didn't quite get to that, but it was close. and when the 6th goal went in, there was somebody next to us, and I was increasingly conscious of the fact that this guy and his son really didn't look like they were getting quite into the unbelievable joy that's going on around us. I mean, people were getting completely overexcited, and rightly so. And the 6th goal went in, and this guy sort of turns and goes, I suppose you think this is funny, don't you? And the son was like crying, and I was going, well, actually, yes, I think this is very funny. I think it's not just funny. I think it's entertaining. I think it's glorious, and I think this is just magic. And the bloke just ruffled some things and just stormed off at that point. But I did think, well, it's your own fault, mate. You shouldn't come to the game if you're going to end up in the home stand and not expect the home team to be celebrating madly if you just shoved 6 past Man United. I mean, so yeah, that was my favourite, and obviously the FA Cup 2003. Yeah, being there for that was an experience.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much, Professor Simon Kemp. It was brilliant to have you on the podcast. Some fantastic insights, and we'll have to do this again sometime. I'll come and travel up here again. Maybe we'll catch you at one of the games.
I'll tell you what we should do. We should record these in one of the conferences that we go to. Yeah. Record it at midnight at the bar.
I've done a couple of podcasts after a few beers now, and there is a definite tail down in quality of my chat after a couple of beers. But yeah, brilliant. Thank you once again, Simon, for getting onto the podcast. If you want to email in your thoughts, saintsfc@podcast@gmail.com. Obviously, we're also on Twitter @saintsfcpodcast. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll be back with you again in a week or two. Ta-ta.